Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the pit lane at Imola. As promised, here is our track walk of this absolutely tremendous circuit, host of this month's Hot Lap competition. I am all too keenly aware that you have seen a lot of the F2004 and a lot of Imola so far this month. However, there is a purpose behind it. I'm trying to be the fastest in the world here, and I'm not entirely sure if I'll ever be successful in that endeavor. However, my fastest lap thus far is a 1:15.592. It's faster than I ever thought the Kunos F2004 could go around this place, and it is very nearly as fast as my personal best in VRC's McLaren MP420. It's really making me reconsider my opinions of the Kunos F2004. In any case, though, let's have a look at this absolutely wonderful Imola Circuit. The Imola Circuit was inaugurated in 1953. It is not as old as some of its Italian counterparts, namely Monza, which has been in existence since 1922. However, Imola does have a story steeped in racing history, particularly in Formula One history. It is officially known as l'Autodromo di Imola, or l'Autodromo Enzo e Dino Ferrari. Of course, the track has been named after the founder and son of founder of the Ferrari company, Enzo, and his son Dino, unfortunately, who died in his youth from a chronic illness. Therefore, the circuit was renamed in the honor of those two men, and of course, Ferrari, very, very important in the Italian national spirit as being one of their premier companies. Of course, the racing success that Ferrari has enjoyed over the years, notwithstanding the decision to rename the circuit. Imola has gone over quite a few different circuit configurations over its lifetime since 1953. The original layout was actually quite similar to what we have today, although we will talk about some of the modifications that have occurred over the years here at this circuit. The current configuration dates back to 2007. The last time that Formula One visited Imola was in 2006 for the 2006 San Marino Grand Prix. The Imola community, as well as the Imola racetrack, are not in the small state of San Marino. San Marino, of course, is too small to have a racetrack in it, and therefore still have space for people to live. But San Marino had the title of the Grand Prix. Imola, however, is in Italy. Looking at the racetrack as we see it, as I mentioned, it dates back to 2007 in its current configuration. The circuit was facelifted somewhat significantly following the 2006 Grand Prix. The pit lane was completely renovated and lengthened quite substantially. The chicane that you can see here, Variante Bassa, was basically removed from the circuit. You can see some of it does remain, but it's only used in motorcycle races now. Effectively, the renovation restored part of the original configuration from the Rivazza corners down at the end of the lap all the way down to the first corner, Tamburello, at the beginning of the lap. This, of course, is the start-finish straight. The pit lane was lengthened significantly, and all of the pit buildings you can see were significantly renovated. Let's have a look at this circuit and show you what you've got to do to be fast around here. Let's begin by showing a rather unique discrepancy that we can see here at this circuit. You can see that the timing line at the end and beginning of the lap is right here. This is where you cross the timing beam to begin your lap time. However, this is not the start line, quite common on a lot of Formula One circuits, but at Imola it's particularly different because this is the timing line here, and this is where the race would end. However, at the start, we go all the way up to basically the end of the straight, and right here is pole position. This is the pole position grid slot, and you can see that there's no actual start line here. I guess you could say pole position is the start line for the race, but the light gantry here at the start of the race is actually quite a distance down the road, so the drivers, even on the front row, have to squint a little bit to see those lights clearly. Anyway, the start-finish straight, as you have probably imagined by this point, is nowhere near straight. It curves several times, always to the right, along its rather long distance, but it is very important here to get that straight line speed going as you head down toward Tamburello turn 1. When you begin the lap here at Imola, you cross the timing line back there, and you can see the racing line. It follows a very smooth arc all the way down the straight from the left-hand side of the circuit to the right-hand side of the circuit, of course, when we're facing in the correct direction. You begin the lap here at the timing line. As you go down the straight in the F2004, you're well into 7th gear at this point. You're exceeding 315 320 kilometers per hour by this point, building up to 325 as you pass underneath the light gantry. You can see this curbing here on the extreme left side of the circuit. This is basically for show. On a fast lap, you don't want to touch this curbing really. It's rather severely cambered, and you can see that it's very thin and it immediately leads onto some grass. You'll lose time really if you touch this curbing, so try to stay away from it. It does slightly widen up as you move toward the end of the curbing, but really you don't want to be anywhere near it. Your left side wheel should basically be just outside of the white line that you can see here. You'll also notice that because the start-finish straight is curved quite substantially, the line changes relative to its positions left or right. So as you're coming down the straight, you are allowing the car to drift toward the center of the racetrack, and then later into the braking zone for turn 1, you're going to be on the right-hand side of the circuit. This white line that you can see, this is the pit exit line, so this is the acceleration lane leaving pit lane. You can go over this, don't worry about it. You can see the brake markers here. 300 meters is behind us, 250, still accelerating now, about 330 kilometers an hour with my current setup on the F2004, 200 meters, still accelerating hard all the time, 100 meters now, and now you can see where we start to get the tire marks on the tarmac, where a lot of the road cars have already been braking for a little bit of time up to this point. Not us though, we're continuing to accelerate right up to about here, about 85-90 meters away from the apex of the Tamburello chicane. 330 kilometers an hour, 7th gear, down to 2nd or 3rd gear for Tamburello. Speaking of Tamburello, here it is. It is a triple element chicane, so you can say that we have Tamburello A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3, however you want to talk about it. You can also see that there is a substantial amount of runoff outside. The original configuration of Tamburello, as many of you probably know, was a sweeping left-hand bend that followed more or less this trajectory, and then it would link up with what is now the current circuit right about here. There were a lot of high-profile accidents at Tamburello over the course of the lifetime of the old configuration here at Imola. Of course, notwithstanding the fatal accident of Ayrton Senna in the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. However, other big names such as Riccardo Patrese, Nelson Piquet, and Gerhard Berger also had big accidents in Tamburello Corner. The corner had a reputation for being dangerous. It had a reputation for causing big accidents. After the 1994 events, the circuit owners had absolutely no choice but to reprofile Tamburello, and that gave rise to the chicane that we see today. The chicane made its debut in the San Marino Grand Prix in 1995. Nonetheless, this is what we have to deal with today. Coming into Tamburello, we've done our braking. We're now in 3rd gear, doing about 100 to 110 kilometers an hour, and then we get into the first element of what is now the Tamburello chicane. You turn in reasonably early here at Tamburello, and then you can see your apex curbing. The curbing in general at this circuit is your friend. If you want to be fast, you must use the curbing. However, all things in moderation. As you come across the apex curbing here at Tamburello, you must be keenly aware of the two different types of curbing we've got. We have the red and white striped curbing, which is normal, and it's very gradually cambered, as you can see, and that's important for a fast lap time. But immediately to the inside of that curbing, you have a little bit of a lip, and then you drop onto this painted concrete, punctuated here by the sleeping policeman. You don't want to get onto this green section at all, and certainly you don't want to go after these sleeping policemen's speed bumps, as we call them in the United States. That will launch you into the upper regions of the atmosphere very quickly, and you will lose a whole bunch of time. However, if you hit the apex curbing well, you're immediately going to have the car bounce off of it toward the right, toward the middle of the track in this section. Once you've exited the first element of Tamburello, the car is going to be right about here, and it's lining itself up for the second element, which is effectively the same as the first, but in the opposite direction. The curbing here on the second apex is almost exactly identical to how it is on the first apex. It's just going to the right rather than to the left. Same rules apply. Use the red and white curbing, don't go on the green, and don't go over the bumps here. Now, coming off of the second element and getting yourself lined up for the exit of the corner, there's a little bit of a difference in philosophy here that I've noticed amid some of the hot laps that people are posting. This exit curbing here, this is the exit curbing for the second element of the Tamburello corner. It is very shallowly cambered and it is usable. However, The car here is in a tremendous moment of roll. It is also in a tremendous moment of heave in a negative direction. It's being pushed down into the circuit because you're accelerating through the exit of the second element of Tamburello, and therefore your speed increases, the downforce squares with speed. So the car's starting to hunker down now onto the tarmac. At the same time, you have lateral loads going in here because you're turning constantly to the right through the exit of the second element of the chicane, which means that the car is basically an inverted pendulum relative to the rear. The car is rotating about a center of gravity somewhat forward of the rear wheels. However, it's using the rear very heavily for its stability at this point. If you hit this curbing too hard, the slight change in camber is going to upset the balance of the rear, and you're very likely to lose the car. So if you do use this curbing at all, just barely skim it with your left rear wheel. If you only hit the white line here, that's even better. I tend to stay away from this curbing as much as I can, but on a really fast lap, sometimes you can't help but hit it a little bit. Just hold on tight. The F2004 does have traction control. I'm running with quite a lot of slip in it, but it is still enough to help me keep things in check if something does go a little pear-shaped in a situation like this. Coming off of the curbing now, the car will start to set itself up toward the right-hand side of the circuit, which is exactly where you need to be for the final element of Tamburello, and now we are rejoining what the original circuit configuration was. This curbing here on the inside, you can hit this. Don't worry about it, it's no problem, but you don't want to hit it too hard. Basically, right here is where you want to make contact with this curbing, and at the same time, you're pulling an upshift into fifth gear. Don't hit the sleeping policeman, and certainly don't go over the green, because immediately after just kissing that apex curbing, you want to get the car positioned to the right-hand side of the circuit for the exit. You're going to pull sixth gear as you pass along this curbing here on the exit of Tamburello. Now, this curbing is safe to use, but you've got this AstroTurf on the outside, and it is slippery, and you will break traction at the rear, which could slow you down. So use the curbing, but don't use the AstroTurf, if that makes any sense. Right about here, we're doing about 250, 260 clicks. We're pulling sixth gear right now, accelerating hard. Keep the car absolutely dead straight as you follow the white line around the right side of the circuit. Pull seventh gear right about now before the asphalt changes into the resurfaced Villeneuve chicane, the second chicane on the circuit. 100 meters, still accelerating hard. 80 meters. Now we're going to start thinking about turning into the Villeneuve chicane here. Now, you do not necessarily want to brake as you turn in. The first moment of your turn in to the Villeneuve chicane is going to be done flat out in 7th gear at about 305, 310 kilometers an hour. However, as you turn in, very gently, because you don't want to upset the weight transfer laterally on the car. If you turn in too abruptly, all the weight is just immediately going to transfer off to the right, and you're going to get understeer at best, and you're going to spin at worst, even with traction control going on. So be gradual with your initial turn in here to the Villeneuve chicane. As your turn in is stabilizing, you're going to lift the throttle and you're going to start braking gently at first with just a bit of trail braking and get your downshift started. You're going to want to hit this apex as you're downshifting from 7th to 6th gear on a really fast lap. You're going to hit this apex with the left side wheels, obviously, and then immediately the car is going to set itself up to the right. All the while, you're braking and you're downshifting all through this first element of the Villeneuve chicane. Now, the car is going to set itself up to the right, as I mentioned, and it's going to hit the second apex right here. At this point, you have now braked from 7th gear into 3rd gear, and you've picked up this apex. Don't hit this apex too hard, though, because what will tend to happen is the car is going to want to bounce to the outside, the opposite side of the circuit, toward the exit curbing. If you hit this apex here too hard, what's going to happen is the car is just going to follow a tangent line from whatever the point was you hit the apex, and it's going to want to bound over the curbing. And you can see here that if you draw a straight line between the apex of the corner and the curbing on the outside, you end up on the grass. So don't do that. What you need to be able to do is control the amount of curbing that you use. Basically, you want to use half of this red and white curbing widthwise. You don't want to go over it, so you can continue your momentum around the corner to the right and make your exit a bit shallower to about this point when you hit the curbing on the outside. There's AstroTurf on the outside, but it's slippery. If you get onto the AstroTurf, it's not the end of the world, but it's not the ideal solution. You just want to hit the exit curbing with your tires on the red and white. You don't necessarily want to hit the AstroTurf. But if you do hit the AstroTurf, what's going to end up happening is the car's going to bottom. You're going to bottom on the wooden plank on the bottom of the car, which means you're going to lose your suspension travel and therefore your traction. So what you need to do then is straighten out the wheels, keep your foot hard on the throttle, of course, because this is an acceleration zone, and just wait for the car to settle down. If you can't get the car settled and back onto the road by the time the curbing runs out, it's still not the end of the world. Yes, you're going to pick up some grass, but the last saving grace here is this slip road. Obviously, it's meant for vehicle access and transit between the infield and the circuit. However, the slip road is paved, and it does give you just enough purchase maybe to get the car pulled back onto the circuit in an absolute last-ditch effort. If this still doesn't work, then the lap is blown and you're going to end up in the grass someplace before Tosa. But the slip road is there for you to use if all else fails. However, on a really quick lap, what you definitely want to do is just get your left side tires over the red and white curbing and then start to track the car to the right for the next corner, Tosa. Here you're in 4th gear, maybe even 5th gear at the 50-meter board before you start braking for Tosa. Tosa is the first real corner on the circuit. In other words, it's not a chicane, it's just a corner by itself. But it's interesting. It's very heavily cambered, and we got to get down low here for you to see the camber, but you can see that it is tilted toward the inside, so that's positive camber. That's going to help us. But because of this, this means that you can brake a bit later for Tosa than you might originally think. Brake here, and then just let the car slow down in a straight line and turn in gradually and hit the apex here. There's a little bit of a difference in the schools of thought across different drivers and across different laps that I've seen. What I tend to do on a quick lap is not quite hit this curbing. Just basically get my left front wheel over the white line and don't go any further, because the camber is there to help you, which means that once you stop turning in and you've hit the apex of the corner, you can immediately start getting back on the throttle and use the camber of the road to track you to the exit curbs here. You can see the Tosa corner is going uphill all the time, and that camber is going to keep the car locked into the racing line, which is very helpful, of course. Even with traction control, though, you want to be careful not to apply too much throttle too quickly. The traction control will cut the spark on the engine and control wheel spin, but it will not do it in an absolutely ideal manner, so you will lose some XL if the traction control cuts in too much. So even with TC, I'm running 5 out of 10 steps on the TC, so I do have quite a bit of slip in it, but still, there is enough interference to interfere with things. So gradual throttle inputs and then build up to full throttle as you're here on the exit curbing out of Tosa. Just as with the curbing out of Tamburello, don't use the AstroTurf. Just put your left side wheels across the red and white stuff. Out of the Tosa corner, what I tend to do as we head very steeply uphill is just keep the car tucked in to the right side of the circuit, basically following the white line. You'll notice that we're cresting a hill now, and we can't see what's coming next. This is about where our eyes are in a Formula One car coming up here. What I tend to do is just let the car drift out to the center of the circuit, more or less, as we go underneath the Sparco sign. Still can't see what's ahead. 150-meter board. We know a corner's coming. Continue up the hill, tuck back into the right, 100 meters, and now we can finally see, as we crest over the top of the hill, we can see the next corner that confronts us, Piratella. Now, Piratella is a very fearsome corner, and I think it's the most difficult one on the whole lap. 100 meters, still accelerating hard. We've pulled 7th gear now, so we're doing about 300, 305 kilometers an hour, 50 meters. Now we're thinking about braking. We'll go from 7th gear to 4th gear for the apex of Piratella. We come into the corner, and we'll turn in early. We'll pick up some apex curbing right here. It's basically identical to the curbing at the other places on the circuit, so don't worry about its characteristics so much. But you do want to make sure that you don't use it too heavily, because if you get the car, the center of the car, over the edge of this curbing, you're going to bottom out, and you're going to lose that suspension travel, of course, which means your wheels are going to go airborne. Also, notice this about Piratella. It is very heavily cambered, just like Tosa is, but this is taken at much higher speed, of course. This is helpful and harmful at the same time. It's harmful because our apex speed here is about 200 kilometers an hour, 200, 205. Sometimes I'll even hit here at 195, 198, something like that. But you're in the realm of 200 clicks as you're coming through Piratella. It's about 120 miles an hour. At that speed, the aerodynamics on a Formula One car are really starting to take hold. You're building downforce all the time. What happens is, this camber is going to put one side of the car higher than the other. So the right side is going to be slightly higher than the left side. At the same time, though, your weight transfer is going to induce roll into the car. So the car is going to want to roll to the right. Obviously, the g-force, the centrifugal force, everything is going to have an equal and opposite reaction. So the car is going to have right roll induced into it, and it's already at a lower ride height on the right-hand side because of the camber in the road. This can cause you to bottom. At these speeds, at this point, about 210 clicks, if you bottom the car and you lose downforce to the diffuser, you're going to go straight off here into the wall, and it's not going to be very pretty. So what you need to do is just be very careful on the throttle, even with traction control. Don't put in too much steering lock. Don't put in too much throttle. Just allow the car to settle down as much as you can. Basically, hurry up and wait is the way to get through Piratella. On the exit, you've got curbing and a very wide AstroTurf runoff. It's a trap. Don't use the AstroTurf. You may think, oh, I've got all of this space on the outside. I've got curbing, I've got AstroTurf, and then I have paved runoff here in concrete, and then I've got the gravel trap. I don't have to worry so much about it. Not so fast. Mention that camber. The left side of the car is going to be a little bit higher than the right side due to that cambering. Plus, you've got the roll coming into effect. So you've got the car rolling off, being pushed off to the right due to the left-hand corner. If you hit this curbing too hard, you're going to bottom the car, and then you're going to run off at a tangent line straight into the grass, into the gravel, and into the wall, depending on how much speed you're carrying. So, again, discretion is the better part of valor. What can also happen here is if you get too far over the curbing, because the car is in this heavy roll moment, and it's got a lot of heave going down toward the circuit due to the aerodynamic downforce, what can happen is the rear end is going to break traction over the curbing. And of course, what you're going to do instinctively is to correct for that with right hand opposite lock. However, because you're going to have a lot of front end grip at this point due to the downforce levels, what's going to happen is the front tires, when you steer into that slide with opposite lock, the front tires are going to grip, and that's just going to catapult you off into the wall on the right hand side of the circuit as well. So let the car basically drift, if that makes any sense to anybody. You'll hit the curbing on a fast lap right about here, and then, because you're still in this rather severe left-hand bend, immediately you're going to have the car track back over to the left-hand side of the circuit. And you'll see this curbing here. They thought about this. Don't use the curbing, though. It's another trap. You can get your left side wheels right up to this white line, and do not proceed any further, because this curbing runs out really a little bit before it should, and then immediately behind it is this rain gutter. And this will just scoop up your left side wheels, and then you'll be punted off into this barrier, which is very close by. So keep your left side wheels here to the white line, no further. As you come down the hill now, 150 meter board, another corner is already upon us. Coming down to the bottom of the hill, 100 meters, lots of compression now in the car. We are approaching Acque Minerali. This is the mineral waters corner, and there are two of them. It's a complex. Coming down here, pulling 7th gear on a really fast lap, about 290 clicks. Now, turn in a little bit early for Acque Minerali. This is the first of two corners. You just want to clip the curbing here with your right side wheels. Don't go too far over it because you have immense forces going on. The car is in 7th gear. You've lifted the throttle ever slightly to get it turned in. However, you've got still about 70-80% throttle dialed in here in 7th gear. So you have maximum downforce for whatever your setup's going to be, because your speed is fairly close to Vmax at this point. The car is going to be in a roll moment, and it's going to be in a heave moment, because remember, you're still going downhill. It's extremely easy to bottom that plank here. And if you do that, again, you lose the suspension travel and you go off in a tangent line out into the runoff. You don't want to do that. So again, very, very careful throttle manipulation through this corner. If you get that right, what you immediately then have to do is get the car positioned right about here. You can use these exit curbs, but they're very short, and you're still doing about 270 clicks at this point, so they run out in about a third of a second, if that. So I tend to stay away from them. Sometimes, again, when you're going really fast and the inertia just carries you to the outside, sometimes you have to deal with it. But at this point, once you've got the car positioned about here, you've got to then brake from 7th gear down into 2nd gear, and you're dropping off about 220 kilometers an hour all the while. It's really crazy, and it happens in about half a second, because here the second element of Acqua Minerale is very tight. If you've got the car positioned correctly, you'll turn in about here, I would say, and then you want to get your right side wheels across this curbing. This is the apex point here for the second Acqua Minerale corner. Very similar curbing to what we saw in Tamburello. You can use the red and white, don't use the green. You can also see just how severe the incline is at this point on the circuit. This is actually here to help you because it's going to keep the car from wanting to shoot off on that tangent line up the hill. However, if you hit this curbing just right, what's going to happen is the car's going to want to bounce to the outside because momentum will take you there, and then you're going to see these curbs on the exit of Acqua Minerale as we head very steeply uphill. Again, use the red and white. If you put your right side wheels inside of this white line, that lap time's going to be invalidated. So basically, get the left side wheels onto this curbing. Use all of the curbing if you want. Don't use the AstroTurf. Keep your right side wheels outside of this white line. Use this curbing. Don't use it too hard because immediately you want to get the car positioned about here as you pass underneath the sign. You're going to pull 4th gear right about now, accelerating very hard all the time, and then allow the car gradually to drift over to the left to position ourselves for the highest point on the circuit, Variante Alta. This is, of course, the high variant. It's another chicane. 100 meters, still accelerating hard. We've pulled 6th gear by this point. 50 meters. Now, we will brake for Variante Alta. We want to keep the car as far to the left as we possibly can for as long as we can, because that's going to give us a less severe of a trajectory through the chicane. 2nd gear, just before I roll off of the brakes, I turn in. I allow that weight transfer to the nose to help the front wheels bite. You want to apex the first element of Variante Alta right about here. If you get this wrong, you're going to run over these very severe speed bumps, and it's going to launch you into low Earth orbit, so don't do that. If you get it right, though, what's going to happen is you're going to be bounced on a tangent line straight for the second apex curbs and the second element of the corner. So basically what you want to do is after your turn in from right about here, you want to run a tangent line from here to here. You're straight lining the chicane as much as possible. So you're taking what is basically a right, left into a straight line, if that makes any sense whatsoever. However, once you get this right and you go across the second apex, you get these sleeping policemen again. It's not quite as important to avoid these in the second element of the corner as it is in the first, but you still don't want to hit them very hard because you will, once again, go into low orbit. You want to hit them enough to get the car to bounce off of the apex and to be forced off to the outside of the circuit. However, you'll notice here on the exit, there is no curbing, but you do have AstroTurf. It's slippery, and the traction control will cut the spark if you go over this AstroTurf to control the wheel spin, and you'll lose acceleration. What you want to do is get your right side wheels on the white line, and no farther, and floor the throttle. If you get that right, you're going up through the gearbox, 4th gear, 5th gear. Circuit's starting to curve off to the left now. Bring the car to the inside and just get to the white line. Pulling 6th gear now and 7th gear. You've straightened it out. Notice the brake boards, 300 meters. Coming down, 250 meters. Now heading downhill. 7th gear, 200 meters. Under the bridge. This curbing, going under the bridge, You can hit it or you cannot hit it. I see no real difference in terms of lap times, but if you do hit it, it can unsettle the car because you're at maximum downforce right now, so be cautious. If you do hit it, just be very gentle. 150 meters, still 7th gear. 100 meters, 7th gear, about 310 kilometers an hour. At this point, about 85, 90 meters from the corner, this is where we start braking. Do not brake with your right side wheels on this curbing. You'll lock up immediately and you're going to spin, particularly if you lock a rear wheel. However, braking now, 50 meters, coming down from 7th gear to 2nd gear for the first of 2 Rivazza corners at the end of the lap. Turn in a little early, hit this apex. You can see the curbing here is slightly different from how it is on the rest of the circuit. This curbing's a bit more flat, but on the inside we have this sort of serrated AstroTurf, I'll call it. It's not full AstroTurf. There is some grass coming up between the green lattice work here, but you can hit it. It's okay. The speed is low enough. You'll come off of the apex and the car will drift out to the outside to this exit curbing. Use the red and white. Do not use the AstroTurf. Coming off of this curbing is very important to position yourself for the turn-in for the second Rivazza corner. You can see that this curbing here on the exit of the first Rivazza is cambered ever so slightly toward the inside of the circuit. You can use that to give yourself a little bit of a push for the turn-in. Turn-in about here, and immediately the car's going to want to track toward the apex of the second Rivazza corner. So if you get it right, what you'll end up doing is you'll turn in right about here, still in 2nd gear, a little bit of trail braking, hit the apex at this point, use the green if you want, and then slowly pick up the throttle in 2nd gear and bring yourself to the exit of the second Rivazza corner. Don't use the AstroTurf if you can help it, but use all of the red and white striped curbing as always. If you get this right, 2nd gear, 3rd gear, 4th gear, come under the sign, 5th gear, 6th gear, and right about now we're pulling 7th gear. Now at the very end of the lap, this is the start-finish straight. There are no more big corners, but now I have a little bit of a difference of opinion with some other people who are also posting these hot laps. What I've been doing for the vast majority of my fast laps is I am running as close to the wall as I can. Now, you can see the racing line is a bit outside of that, but what I'm doing is I'm using all of this green asphalt and I'm getting all 4 wheels inside of this green asphalt and getting as close to the Armco as I dare. My theory with this is twofold. One, if we go back to the exit of Rivazza, you can see that we've got ourselves a straight line, and a straight line, of course, is the shortest distance between any 2 points. So if I follow this straight line exactly, and then, we have a corner. If I cut to the inside of the corner, I shorten the distance of the corner. So that's one reason for running so close to the wall. The second reason for running so close to the wall is I'm trying to take advantage of the NASCAR effect. You'll see stock cars, when they're running on ovals, they will run close to the outside wall, and the idea is you're accelerating the airflow between the wall and the side of the car. Therefore, if you raise the speed of air, its pressure drops. It's the same principle on which ground effect works, and it's the same principle on which lift is generated from an aircraft wing. Faster moving air on the top surface is lower in pressure, therefore the aircraft rises. In this case, we're taking the airplane and we're flipping it over by 90 degrees. So I'm having faster moving air on the right-hand side of the car than I am on the left, meaning that perhaps there's slightly less drag from running closer to the wall, but at the same time I'm inducing low pressure on the right-hand side of the car, which could mean the car can get pulled in toward the wall. So you do have to be mindful of that. The other theory of how to run down the start-finish straight here is basically to follow the racing line. So you can come in here, you can clip the white line if you want, and then most people will just follow a very nice stable arc down the start-finish straight and back now to the timing line just past the flag stand right there. And there's the timing line and the lap is complete. I like to do it my way, and you like to do it your way. I don't know who is actually correct. I don't know really if one is faster than the other. You could argue that if you cut closer to the wall here, by cutting this corner, you're scrubbing off a little bit of speed by having to add in slightly more steering lock. I get that, but at the same time, I'll argue that if you're coming across the circuit this way, you're adding slightly more distance to the end of the lap. Does it cancel itself out? Maybe. Last detail that we have to talk about here, this is the Variante Bassa. This is the last corner on the circuit. We're not running this in this configuration. However, one of the reasons why we can't do one-to-one comparisons with Formula One lap times from the real world is because prior to 2007, when they were using the older configuration here, they were running Variante Bassa. So what happened in this renovation in 2006 and 2007 was Rivazza 2 was the last corner on the circuit, really, and the cars would run straight down what is now start-finish. They would make a right turn where they do now, and the pit entrance used to be right here, really. They would brake and they would turn into the second gear, Variante Bassa, which was right here, and it would follow this trajectory through the corner. Here were the exit curbs, and then right here was the timing line. So the timing line really hasn't moved. The race would start up there, and it would end here. That legendary battle in 2005 between Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso to the very end of the race, yep, they got very close to each other through Variante Bassa. However, that has been deleted from the lap of Imola for most four-wheeled vehicles. Motorcycles still run this today, though, as far as I am aware. However, that is a lap here dissected, and hopefully this was of some use to some of you. Imola, it is an absolutely tremendous circuit. I really, really love it to death. There's nothing about this place that I think needs to change. There's nothing about it that I would love to see done differently. It really is an absolutely glorious circuit, and you can see some of our draw distances here have gone a little bit messed up, but we can get a great view of the circuit now from the air. The whole configuration, really, it hasn't changed all that much over the years, all things considered, but really, it is a tremendous challenge to be fast around this place. It's got high-speed corners, it's got low-speed corners, it's got technicality, it's got flat-out runs. Honestly, I love, love, love this place. And I'm very happy that this month's Hot Lap competition is here, because this is the circuit that you can run thousands of laps around and never get tired of. It's that kind of a place. It really, really is. Coming back down now to the ground level and having a look here at our Ferrari F2004. I am really being humbled by what this car is able to give us with these hot laps, because I thought that Kunos had made some mistakes when they brought this car to Assetto Corsa. I thought it was too slow, like many of you did, but what we're seeing is quite the opposite. This car, now with my latest lap time of a 1:15.592, we are within a couple of hundredths of the McLaren MP420 from VRC. So this is a fast car. It absolutely is. It just has to be set up and driven correctly, but it's quick. I'm not gonna lie. It's quick, boys. Anyway, I will leave you with an onboard look at a couple of hot laps that I have done here at Imola, just to show you what all of this looks like in practice. I hope that this was informative. Thank you all very, very much for watching. Ferrari Man 601 saying thanks, and we will see you soon.